Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise this afternoon to give my contribution on what is a really important motion before this Parliament. And I do so bringing forward messages from both farmers in Tasmania, peak bodies in Tasmania, people associated with industry supporting farmers in Tasmania who've had an absolute gutful. They've had a gutful of being let down and being left to hold the responsibility of the failures of this government. I've never heard Minister Ellis stand with such a monotone contribution about such an important issue. If there was passion and fire in the belly of this government to stand up for farmers and protect their reputations, then there wouldn't have been such a slow and monotone contribution about something that is so important. We know that farmers have been let down by this government, and the mover of the motion mentioned that there were 3 ministers across this portfolio. Well, in fact, it's been such a mess and such a rotation that there have been 4 ministers in recent years that have had the chance to make sure that farmers' reputations are protected, that their jobs and their families and Tasmania's reputation are protected, to act with urgency. What is needed here is urgency, not talk, not consideration, not things on the table, but action. There are already in place the frameworks that exist to make sure that the reputations of our farmers are protected, but this government don't prioritise and don't fund and resource the action required to make sure that those things are maintained in the community. In speaking to processors, and I know Mr Tucker went out on site to TQM, I picked up the phone and spoke to a number of abattoir operators across Tasmania. I reached out to a number of the people that had their facilities trespassed to gather this video footage, albeit very disturbing and not acceptable to anybody in Tasmania, let alone the farmers of Tasmania, and had conversations with farmers, either outgoing phone calls or incoming phone calls, because they've had enough. It's not good enough to have a requirement to order, and I know that Minister Ellis talked about how good this government is of going out and doing the audits. Well, I can tell you one of the abattoirs that I spoke to haven't been audited in over 2 years. Now, that's not good enough, and it's a responsibility of this government, of this minister, to actually uphold the expectations and the rules required. We have regulations as recently within the year of 2023 around the welfare of cattle and sheep. We have expectations in this community that will be upheld, but this government needs to clearly demonstrate to operators, to the Tasmanian community, to Tasmanian people and to farmers that they are committed to actually ensuring that those things happen. We have producers in Tasmania with, as the Minister said, national and international markets that are being let down, where their accreditation certification is delayed. They are so under-resourced and so under-committed to getting this right that people aren't actually being supported and are being let down by this government. Tasmanians are being let down by this government, and farmers are being let down. And Minister Ellis talks about the impacts of a potential closure at TQM. There's a lot of focus about TQM, and yes, what was shown in those videos, and I've watched the videos, is horrendous and not acceptable. And the language that's been expressed to me from farmers about how they've been let down with what's happened is things that can't be repeated in this Parliament. But it's not just TQM, and one of the things that's happened over recent days is that there's been an unfair focus on certain individuals. So there's been a lot of focus on TQM, but there were 4 other facilities that also were trespassed and video footage was found. Has the government, has the minister reached out to them? Have they actually been out on site or picked up the phone? As I understand it, at least one of those operators hasn't heard from the department or the minister. And you would think, in what is internationally and nationally potentially going to cause a massive disruption and an additional impact to the wellbeing of farmers, that would be the minimum that they would do. That they would do the minimum to make sure that they upheld the standards and requirements set by this government. Well, what I can tell you is there is quite rightly a lot of focus on animal welfare here, and quite rightly people are expressing their devastation and disgust and concern and anger about what has allowed to happen by this government. But one of the focuses as well we have to focus on is the people in Tasmania that are also impacted and devastated by this, whether it be community members that are confronted by the footage that's been distributed, whether it be farmers and their communities and their families, whether it be processors and other industries that support farmers, whether it be the employees that have to go out and do the investigations. We have to care for and consider the impact on everyone in this system, whether it be the meat workers themselves, that we had the Australian Meat Industry Employee Association representative in Tasmania come out and talk about the need for appropriate training and induction for workers right across Tasmania. Because if a worker is put in a workplace and doesn't have the right induction or training or support, then they're also impacted by this right now. So there needs to be a focus on Tasmania, our reputation. There needs to be a re-establishment of trust from this government. And although the minister's not here in the room, the actual minister is not here with us, has the opportunity, as I understand it, to be here, perhaps in the Speaker's Reserve, to watch this very important debate occur across the Parliament. The minister that actually brought forward the government's contribution isn't here anymore. But you talk about the pressures of farmers right now and the pressure that this puts on them and the potential suspension of the export licence and what extra pressure that will put on farmers, then you've got Minister Ellis up here who's already putting pressure. He stands up and says that he supports farmers. Well, the debacle of the fire tax is another pressure. Farmers right now, with input costs rising, with interest rates, with the market challenges with price, are already under pressure. And this is one more thing. The wellbeing of farmers right now, I have had the opportunity and taken the opportunity to meet with and talk to farmers about the stresses that they're under. They're already feeling devastating, in some cases, devastating and overwhelming feelings of loss and challenge in the operations, which is really tough after a dry season and seasonal conditions right now. There is already a lot of stress. So what we need to do is not talk about everything is on the table, not talk about what will happen to ensure this never happens again. We need to take action, and that's why I commend the member of this place, Mr Tucker, for the motion that he's put before us, because it requires action and it has a sense of urgency and it requires a report back so this government is held to account on the work that they should be doing and could have already be doing over at least the last 7 years to ensure that the animals and the livestock of Tasmania raised by our farmers in a way that they do with great care, with great diligence and with great expectation that they will be processed appropriately for a market that they're working towards, not only in Tassie, not only in the country but across the world, that they have had that broken and have been let down by this government. I want to actually just touch on as well before the break, and I'll be back on my feet after lunch, but I want to touch on one other person that's been let down at the moment in Tasmania. And there has been a lot of focus on Jake Oliver at TQM. There has been also focus on some of the other abattoirs in Tasmania. But what has occurred also is that people that don't have operational management or connection to some of these abattoirs have also been pulled into this matter. And I just want to put on the record here how sad I feel and how devastated I feel for an incredible Tasmanian that's been drawn into this, and her reputation has been used to raise these issues. And there's no doubt the issues are terrible. But Stephanie Trethewey, Australian of the Year, a campaigner for rural and regional mums who feel isolated and sometimes challenged with mental health issues, has been put front and centre of this with one abattoir and doesn't even have any operational connection to this. It is not okay, whether it be a farmer or an animal or someone associated by distance to a facility, to have their brand and their reputation dragged down as a part of this conversation. And I just want to put that on the record, because one of the deep concerns with what's happening right now is farmer welfare, and I know that personally, and I have heard from Stephanie personally,